Welcome to another episode of the Sabastian Show. Today, I get to interview a dear friend of mine, Gary Polson, who is the chairman of Sidcor, a $300 million company here in LA that is a global leader in outsourced sales. I think you guys are going to get a lot out of this conversation. His story is pretty incredible, and there's a lot for everybody to learn. So let's get right into it. Gary, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Sebastian, for having me.
Well, this is exciting for me on so many fronts. You and I have known each other for 13 years now.
Yep.
And you have been such an incredible example to me as a father, as a husband, as a business leader. I think your example says so much about you, and I hope we can get into that today, and hopefully that there are things we can extrapolate that can help others. But I want to start with your story growing up. I think that always helps people. You grew up here in LA, and I'm more of a transplant. I came from the Pacific Northwest and moved here later years. So what was that like? Describe your childhood growing up in LA, what you see now versus what it was like growing up here, and kind of, how that has shaped your perspective on life.
Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words about, I appreciate your friendship, and I love our time together, whether it's fantasy football or just hanging out.
Got the championship a few years ago. I'm going to get it again.
So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I feel like I won the genetic lottery. I grew up in a very fortunate situation. My parents still alive, and they were just unbelievable people. My grandparents, all four grandparents, were very big in my life, and I just had a very fortunate. My dad's an incredible example. My grandpa Meyer was an incredible example. So it was really, fortunate. I didn't realize it at the time, but obviously as an adult looking back, it was just, just a nice way to grow up. And I grew up in comfortable circumstances. I kind of had everything I needed. I didn't work through college except for the summers. And so I knew I'm like that, very rare situation, but I very much appreciate it. And at the time, just kind of like every other kid, going to school, trying to do well, and having fun with my friends, and pretty typical childhood in that way.
So you said you grew up that way and you appreciate it now. Did you feel like you had perspective even when you were a kid to appreciate that?
Well, as we moved into a nice neighborhood when I was 13, Tarzana. And at that point, I started realizing that I was very lucky. Most of my friends, or a lot of them, not most, but a good number of them, came from, divorced homes, and dads that weren't around a lot at times. And I realized how lucky I was. And
both parents still together.
Both parents still together. My grandparents around. Sunday was family day. My friends would come to our house. Everyone did. It was just like, I go, wow, I have it really, really nice.
And you went to Berkeley.
Yeah.
Got a degree in law.
Mm-hmm.
Not practicing law.
No. No.
And really, one of my favorite kind of stories that you bring up is your early entrepreneurial journey, right? And tell us about what your dad did and what your grandfather did and how that turned into you going down the entrepreneurial path.
Well, my grandfather was a very entrepreneurial guy. He came to Canada when he was 14, Winnipeg, and he...
Where did he immigrate from?
He immigrated from, which I guess is Ukraine area, and he went by himself, and then he worked his way up, in the business world to have his own business and do quite well for himself. And then my dad, he started a couple businesses when he was in his 20s, They didn't quite work out. He had to kind of start over again when he was about maybe 32 years old, got a job working for a big real estate company. And actually what he did was he was a salesperson at the housing models, the housing, on the big housing track. And it was a commission-only kind of situation. But he could do real well when times were good. But unfortunately, in real estate, it's very cyclical, and then he struggled at times. But he was an incredibly hard worker. He was great with his teams. He built, sales teams. They'd come over and we'd get to meet the people. It was real fun. Tell crazy stories. Right? He had the Sunday night calls. And listened to the calls. We had no choice. There wasn't a lot to do. And it was really interesting to me when I heard my dad talk to his people. And I just was fortunate just to be around that.
Yeah. My grandfather immigrated from Norway through Canada.
Oh, did he?
Which is interesting. So your grandfather was entrepreneurial right out the gate, whether by necessity or desire, one way or the other. And you tell a lot of stories about kind of value-based or character-driven decisions that you've made that were really exemplified for you by your father and your grandfather. But I remember the story about your grandfather and the Trailblazers and talking about...
Oh, that was my dad.
That was your dad. Okay.
That was my dad.
And talking about how the owner of the Trailblazers, why he was a success and why he did well. Would you mind sharing that story?
Sure.
So I feel like such a good one.
Yeah. The founder where my dad worked for, I don't know, almost 38 years or so, Larwin was the company. They were probably the biggest privately owned home builder in the United States. If they weren't number one, they're very close to it. He owned the Portland Trailblazers, and in 1977, when I was 19 years old, they won the NBA championship with Bill Walton. And Larry Weinberg, the founder, was on TV all the time as they were showing the finals. And it really... obviously, as a young guy, piqued my interest. I was starting to think I wanted to get in the business world. So I asked my dad, what made Larry so great in business? Because I want to study what he studied or learn what he learned and, take that path. And my dad told me that it was his integrity, that Larry had the most integrity of any person he ever met. Well, at the time, that seemed like... a lot of people have integrity. It has to be more than that. And I asked my dad, I said, Dad, it has to be more than that. And he was thinking more and more, and he goes, I know what it is. When Larry gives you his word, you could take it to the bank. So I'm thinking, I go, Dad, isn't that the same thing as integrity? And he goes, oh, yeah, I guess it is. I'm sure my dad gave me other answers. I'm sure I pestered him about it, but that stuck in my head. My dad thought very highly of him, Larry. And if that's what he thought, I thought to myself, well, that's good enough for me. And that I'd use, character and integrity to be my calling card, so to speak, in business. That would be the thing that, at least until I got some experience, that would hopefully get me down the right path.
Yeah, and I love that story, and it shows up in your own life. And going full circle, that a big reason, we'll get that later, but one of the big reasons that I decided to work with you in your organization was because of you, the character of the person you were, and how that shows up in business. But I like starting there because so many people are looking for the magic formula for success, right? This hidden thing that makes you successful. And so when you talk about character-based values that really help support success, they don't want to hear it. Like, no, it can't be that. It's got to be something else, And so I always love that story for that reason. It's like, oh no, it's actually the same thing, right?
Well, I at one time too wanted to find the magic formula. I think it's probably natural as you go into business. You're thinking it's this like a Rubik's Cube. You got to figure it out. That's how I felt early on, that I wasn't doing well at the beginning of my business career because I didn't know how the Rubik's Cube worked.
Yes.
And someone had to show that to me. And it was only later that I realized there is no Rubik's Cube magic formula. It's a lot of the typical things that, we were taught when we were young, and they're true. It's your character and the work ethic and grit you put in, and when you get knocked down, how you get back up, how you learn, and your student mentality. And if you're great at those things, how you connect with people and build relationships, all the things we learned when we were young, and they turned out to be the things that are real important.
It's hard for people to hear that, right? They realize you're exactly right. And I would think there is an element of luck, right? I think we would all agree.
Yes.
There's absolutely an element of luck. But it seems that the pervasive message is it's mostly luck. Or it's like, well, you just got lucky. It's like, no, I mean, luck certainly plays a part. We're lucky that we live in the United States. I would argue, despite how things are being managed, that we're lucky to live in California, in Southern California. So there's certainly an element of luck. But it is those character traits that show up time and time and time again. And usually when you start talking to people who are older that have had success, they tried sharing that, and the young guy doesn't want to hear it. They're like, no, it can't be those things. What else is it? And so I continually try to hammer that message home, because if we get the fundamentals right, everything else gets easier, right? And so you exited your company before for, I think, an 8-digit exit, did very well. You're chairman and owner of a $300 million company. You've been, by all measures, you've been very successful in life, but you didn't start out successful. Even as you said, you hit the genetic lottery, you had a great family, you had great examples, but it wasn't like you didn't struggle both financially and in business. You went through seasons of struggle. And sometimes I feel like we miss that. And I want to get into that a little bit, because very often we make these jumps that, well, of course he succeeded because he had these things, right? It was just handed to you. And in many cases, you see that with people. And I know you well enough to know that wasn't the case. And it doesn't mean you didn't have certain privileges, and you certainly had great examples, but you also struggle. Can you share some times early in your business career where you thought about giving up, or you're like, man, maybe business isn't for me, or entrepreneurship is just not going to be the path for me? And specifically, I'm thinking of stories with you and Susan, and like the tension that was there. A lot of those inspired me in my early years of building my business, because like, oh man, this is part of the process.
Well, no doubt I had a leg up because of the example of my dad and being able to watch him, and just having the ability to get the education I got. And with that, it was still really hard, for me at least. I started my first business at 23, didn't know what I was doing. Through that experience, got off to a great start the first year, and then, unfortunately wasn't consistent with my work ethic. And the business went out of business. And at that time, I remember I just thought I didn't have what it took. I didn't think I'd be good in business. I didn't have what, I remember one time in the car with Susan, I was like, basically, probably like tears in my eyes, saying I wasn't good enough. I didn't have what it took to be in business, and I got down on myself from that. And then even, with the commercial printing, it took a few years to get that going. And I tried other businesses in between and couldn't get them going. And it was a lot. I mean, and fortunately, through the reading of successful people that I did when I was younger, I knew that success was based on how well you could get through the struggle. Yeah. So I just kept at it, knowing that eventually, it's going to come together.
So Susan, who's your wife, you guys have been married for
36 years, and we've been together for 41 years.
Incredible. It's just a statistical anomaly in this day and age. But
yeah.
It's fair to say, even though she would probably say you came from good stock,
yeah,
she didn't marry into success.
At the time, not the opposite. Yeah.
And so that's pretty incredible that she stuck with you. Yeah. Right through that season, and you guys see them together. They're an incredible couple, and they have 3 beautiful children who are all successful and grown adults now. But being married and trying to start a business and be a success, is incredibly stressful.
Yes,
right. And there's those moments when it's like, man, can I even do this? Maybe I should take the safe route. Maybe I just go get a secure job. And I don't remember all the details. This is coming to me in faint. So if you don't remember the story, we can just pass on it. But it's something about Yosemite and being like
Oh.
like taking a completely different route. Just like,
Yeah.
no, that's not the life I want.
Well, I would had after my first business failed, it rocked me, and it started getting, and I was very stressed through this process, and I wasn't so fun to be with all the time, and I remember being uncertain of things, and also knowing that Susan, I got to be realistic with her of what's going to happen. So I remember, and I don't remember what age I was, maybe 25 or so, or 26, telling Susan that, look, we got two ways to play this. One, I could get a job like as a teacher in high school, maybe coach some sports. We can move up near Yosemite, which I loved, and I'll never be stressed. I'll be home early, and we can have a life like that. And or I could be the entrepreneurial life, but it's going to take me probably 5 or 6 years, even knowing what business I'm going to be in that could lead our family to success. And I'm going to be working a lot. I'm going to be very stressed. But I want to know what you want. And Susan goes, Gary, I love you, and I want you to do whatever you want to do. I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty good. And she goes, but, and I go, stabbed. She goes, but I'm a city girl. I like the nice things. So if you're going to be with me, we're living in LA. You got to make it happen.
No pressure.
So that was pretty funny.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
So they say.
Yeah.
And you made it so.
But the point of that, though, that I think is important is even at that time, even now, my relationship with her was the most important thing to me. And if she said she wanted to go down door A, I was going down door A. If she wanted B, I'd go B. I didn't care. I was going to make a great life of it anyway, as long as her and I were good. And I think that's the important thing is that relationship's so important that if you get that right, great. And my attitude was I could be happy doing anything, living anywhere, as long as my most important relationship is strong. So,
and I think I want to get into this for a second here because it's a good point. But you're one of the most profound impacts on your life and your life decisions is who you decide to get married to.
Correct.
Right. What went into that decision for you? Because when I see you guys together, it's incredible. 41 years later, you can see in your eyes, she's the love of your life. And then there's still a passion and a love there that I think is super encouraging for a lot of people in a time when things aren't, for a lot of people, that's just not how they look at relationships or marriage right now. And we need great examples of what is it, how do you get through this stuff? So can you talk about that and how you knew that, hey, this is who I want to be with?
Okay, well, I didn't know.
Okay.
I mean, just, the great thing is I had great role models with my parents and my mom's parents, my grandparents, of what it should be. So again, that's another reason I won the genetic lottery. A lot of people don't get to see that every day like I did. So it was really important to me to be able to kind of have that life.
And your parents now are in their 90s.
My dad's 91, just had his birthday a few weeks ago. My mom's 86.
Incredible. And they're obviously
and they're doing
still
great,
married.
and they're still amazing people. When I was, now, my mom knew Susan before I did because Susan was a friend of my sister's from high school and college. But anyway, my mom saw me with Susan early on, and said, "Oh, Gary, you're crazy about her. I could tell. Like, I've never seen you like this." And as we were dating more and more and actually living together for a bit, she said that she's right for you. She's the right one. I didn't have that much confidence, because what did I know about? I was like, how do you pick the right person that is going to be with you for 60 years and have a great relationship? I was less confident in that. I mean, I was mad about Susan, but when my mom said that gave me the confidence because she knew. I knew because she had a great marriage and her parents And that just gave me a lot of confidence.
There's a lot of track record there that you
Yeah,
can lean on.
I had a lot of trust, but I was a little nervous about it. You know, going before that, like, how do you know? I mean, it's a long time.
Yeah. So was there anything besides your mom giving a stamp of approval? Were there any things that you were looking at that made you think, yeah, this is who I want to spend the rest of my life with?
Yeah.
Or maybe it is another frame, somebody who's in their 20s now. What advice would you give them that, you know, are looking for healthy relationships, looking for stable relationships, that want a partner and then go with? What kinds of things do you think are important to look for?
Well, I think that our values were the same. You know, are very similar. I mean, you know, we just had the same values, and what we wanted from life was the same. So I guess the same vision of what we wanted our life to be and the same values. That's real, you know, important. I think we had a good chemistry. That's helpful. But it's really the vision and values. And that was, you know, real important. And I think that's what I would say.
Well, there's a lot of good data behind what you're saying. The lasting relationships, whether it's business or personal, come down to three dynamics: shared vision, shared values, and shared conflict resolution.
Yeah.
And getting all three of those right.
Yeah. I don't know if we were ever so good on the conflict resolution as, you know, we're probably less about that.
It's something you learned, obviously got better at in time.
Yeah,
Yes.
never great. Never great at it. You know, fortunately, we don't have that many conflicts. We did when we were younger. I mean, we had the period of time, we call them the slab of cheese days,
I remember these
when Brooke and Jack were really little, and I was working tremendous hours. I wasn't around, and Susan had her hands full. And so that was very stressful. I'm sure there was a lot of I know there was a lot of conflict then. But, you know, I don't know. We just kind of get through it. You just got to get through it.
You had told me, and it's something that I do to this day, but you had told me no matter how hard your day was and how stressful you were at work, you had a habit or routine. Before you'd get out of the car, you'd listen to a song, or you would just decompress yourself so you could reset and walk in as refreshed as you could be for your kids and your wife. And that stuck with me, something I do to this day.
And I also put the hand on the door. This is corny, and it doesn't always work, but that's in the old days. You put the hand on the door and pretend you're getting all this electric energy. So when you come in, you're coming in strong. That was part of it too.
I love that. Well, I think that is important. Just little hacks to get yourself reset, because we don't want to bring the stress and pain of our businesses home to our family. And it's really easy to do, especially when things are tough. Like you said, the slab of cheese days. You want to explain that story? Because it's a pretty funny one.
Just one time, you know, look, even today, sometimes I have a hard time if I'm really, you know, overwhelmed to not bring that home. I mean, that's a tough thing. It's something we have to all learn.
Yeah.
It's a discipline not to bring it to your children or your, you know, so. But the slab of cheese was one time I came home, probably 9 at night. There was no dinner, and I was, you know, angry that there was no dinner. And Susan was mad that I was angry, so she goes, "You want dinner? I'll get you dinner." And she went in the refrigerator, got a brand new, you know, slab of cheddar cheese, put it on the table that she actually built with her own hands and tools, because, you know, she built our stuff, and she smashed with the knife and, you know, gave me a slice of cheese and here's your dinner. I was really mad. I called my friend Brian. I went over, I don't know, and he calmed me down, but that was the most mad I ever was.
Now when you look at that story, what do you see?
Well, first I was so narcissistic, and, you know, I didn't know how hard it was for Susan raising the kids until Brooke had kids. And I saw what Brooke goes through. I go, oh my gosh, it's so amazingly hard. I didn't go, Susan, feel so bad. I was working. I didn't see what you went through. And I was not nice about it and supportive as I should have been. I feel really guilty about that. But I was.
You're so focused on trying to come through for your family and to be a success in business that it wasn't easy for you to step in and see what your wife was going through in that same process. Which I think so many of us can deal with, right? That's a very normal human experience, to put yourself in the practice of putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Right.
And so you're a lucky grandfather, and you were able to see a different perspective.
I spend a lot more time with my grandkids than I have with my children at the young ages. And so I see what Brooke every day, the monotony of it when they're really little, and they're either sleeping, then you're feeding them, then they're changing their diaper, and then you're over and over, and the patience that you have, and oh my gosh, it is a tough job. And the thing that amazes me is like your mother, that are raising their children on their own and having a job, and she had a pretty significant job over at Microsoft, and so those are the real heroes of this country, in my view.
I 100% agree. The mothers are the unsung heroes. I don't think they get nearly as much recognition and adoration that they deserve.
Totally. With Susan or with my daughter Brooke, I mean, because they're raising our future, and it is not easy. And how you do it has a big effect on them. It's a really, really difficult job.
Yeah, and my mother, single mom, as you're pointing out, raised Joel and I. She was an office manager for a dentist and played the role of male and female. Right, I had to play both those roles. And when I look at even in my own life with Casey, she's for the most part got to be a stay-at-home mom and take care of the kids, and it's a struggle. To your point, it's that's not easy, right? No. Having young kids at home is really challenging for all the reasons that you bring in, and then you start thinking, how are single parents pulling that off? That's incredible, both male or female. It tends to be more, unfortunately, more women that have to bear that load. But either way, being a single parent is it's unbelievable. So shout out to all the single parents who are doing it right out there, because it's tough. I know it's tough on many ways. And then, to your point, Casey's mom was also a single parent who was worked at Microsoft.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. So in both cases, it's just wow. What did you learn being a father? What came out? I mean, I think you're a phenomenal father, as well as I was in just how the relationship you have with your kids and how they've grown up to be awesome adults who are contributing to society. What did you see there? What do you learn? What have you learned about parenting?
Gosh, it is the toughest job. It's really hard to know if you're doing it right. Hope we did it right. I think we did. But it's very difficult. You just don't know of what's the right thing. Should I do this or should I do that? And it's hard to know if your kids are doing okay. Yeah. I remember asking my mom, I go, how do I know if our kids are turning out okay? And my mom goes,
what'd she say?
She goes, well, you look at their friends. If you like their friends, they're doing fine. But if they're hanging out with the guys in the black trench coats with the, that are kind of scary looking and, with all the face piercings, you may want to kind of see how they're doing.
Right.
That was kind of her response.
Yeah, so you're looking at their friends.
If you like their friends, then they're fine.
Yeah.
That was her response. And that made a lot of sense.
At least that's a good early indicator.
Yeah.
Not that we're necessarily against people with trench coats and piercings, but there is an energy that can come with that.
Well, in the old days, it was not it was less common. Now it's a style thing, so you can't go by that now. But in general, the gist is by looking at their friends.
100%. That's a good one.
And but one of the things that you have to learn is patience. And I remember reading, I think it was in Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He was talking about a man who was very hard on his 10-year-old child, and finally exploded and told the child, do you know what Abraham Lincoln was doing when he was your age? And the child goes, no, but I know what he was doing when he was your age. So I think we are overly harsh on our kids. We judge them like adults, and And that really impacted me. I'm, it's about being patient. Now, as a grandfather, I kind of realized that a lot of the things I worried about my kids, you just don't have to worry about. They're going to turn out fine, most likely, if they have love and parents that care about them, and by and large, they're going to turn out pretty fine.
And if I'm to infer, you're saying a lot of what they catch is by example.
Yes,
or how you
it's
show up.
monkey see, monkey do for the children. And also, it's good to let them struggle. And I see that more as a grandkid. It really impacted me was when my oldest, Olivia, oldest grandchild, she was learning to walk. And I remember I had a babysitting her for an hour, and we were on the carpet, and I was chasing her, and she was falling, and she was trying to walk, and she fell so many times. And she kept getting back up, and I'm kind of thought that in our DNA is the ability to struggle and overcome it.
Yes.
I don't know what happens later in life when I was such a quitter when I was in high school, and, but where that went. But I was the kid that learned how to walk and fell a bunch of times. So I have that in me. Everyone does. And what I realize is the struggle is good. Olivia now is, all excited about doing the monkey bars. And for months, all she wanted me to do was take her to do the monkey bars at the park. And she could hardly do them. But she was so excited about them, and she was telling her friends to watch how good she was. She'd do like 1 or 2 bars and then yell for me to get her because so you wouldn't want to fall. So, and when I was thinking, I go, this is great, because the muscle of learning how to struggle through something and keep at it with enthusiasm, even if it's not going well, is so good.
Yes.
And then I had some friends that came that literally taught her visited and taught her in 2 seconds how to do the monkey bars. And I was kind of disappointed in this in a certain sense, because I like her struggling. But a week after, he left, she couldn't do them again. So now she kept struggling at them. I think it's a good thing. The ability to learn how to struggle is real important. And I realize as a grandparent, as a kid, sometimes I stop my kids from struggling because I want them to, feel good.
Yeah.
Grandparent, I would never stop them from struggling.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story, and I think we, as parents, as leaders, as friends, we don't want to see the people in our life struggle, but very often our best life lessons come through that process.
And I learned this a lot from Al, my therapist. Mm-hmm. He would say that I'm preventing people from struggling too much. I'm trying to solve it, fix it. Let them struggle. That's how they learn the most. And that helped me a lot.
And I think the difference is, as a parent so far, what I figured out, but I'm early in the process relative to you, is just to figure out the difference between something that's going to have long-term implications versus something that may have short-term pain, but they're going to grow and learn from, right? We're not saying let people suffer and to be, sadistic about it, but give people the space to figure it out. Don't baby them.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree with that.
And tell us, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started your own school because you were, I won't fill in the blanks, but you started your own school.
Yeah.
And I believe originally your kids were involved in the school. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about why you did that?
Well, I wanted my children to have a religious education, and there wasn't really an appropriate school in the area at the time. And at least for elementary school. And so, I was asking other people, like a mentor of mine who I worked for when I was in high school and college, very successful. I said, Howard, why don't you start this school? We need that. And he goes, why don't you? You're 3 years old or whatever. Why don't you do it? I said, yeah, why don't I do it? So my wife and I and got some other friends, and so let's go do this. And very experiential education, a lot like at University of Chicago, UCLA. They're kind of Dewey kind of experiential kind of way. Because I do think that kids learn in different ways. Not all
Montessori style?
No. It's more that different kids could learn from different experiences.
Got it.
Some may be by reading, some may be by activities, and it's based on kind of looking at the whole child, just not how well they read or write.
Understood.
And all that. And there was a certain kind of education that we really liked. And so we went about it. It was very difficult to do, but I learned a lot from the process and made some great friends through the process, and we educated a lot of people through the process, and I think in a healthy way.
So you started a school because there was a need that was needing to be met.
Yeah,
and nobody
need
else.
to be met, and I've always loved education. Matter of fact, when I was at Berkeley, I was thinking that maybe one day I, could be the state superintendent of schools or somehow get involved in education. I don't know. Well, I am now.
We're going to get to that.
I am now in what I do for work, but that always has been important to me.
Yeah, and it shows up as long as I've known you. And your heart is always centered in teaching and being an example. Is the school still around?
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. So, quick math, 25, 30 years.
From 1994, I guess next year will be
30 years.
30 years next year.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. Wow. It is.
And you're a big sports guy, big LA sports guy.
Yeah.
He's drinking out of a LA Dodgers mug and love the Lakers and the Rams.
Yeah.
Ugh. I love the Rams, but only because
Well,
of
you got Bobby Wagner back,
I know,
so you
I'm
got to be
super
happy.
am I
You guys
excited.
are looking pretty good with stealing all those draft picks from Denver.
Yeah, no, it was that was a haul for sure. Looking forward to it. Hopefully
That
we'll
was
have a good
fun going to the game together, though, when we
was.
saw Russell Wilson coming back.
Yep,
That
and we
was
won
an
by
experience.
that was top 3 experience of 2020. That whole week, but that was
We
an
had fun.
incredible
I
experience
love that.
for sure. And it's always good catching
Seeing
the
you
Rams
at your home.
and screaming my head off. People don't realize I'm
Yeah.
probably unhealthy obsession with the Hawks, but it is what it is. So this is, for me, this is an interesting point because I'll stay light on it, but you went into printing, commercial printing.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to know a lot of people in LA business and Hollywood and the sports scene here. You had a couple of stories I'd love for you to go over before I kind of pivot into some other things, but 2 stories that really stand out to me. One is, I believe it was your cousin.
Mm-hmm.
If you could tell us that story. You were frustrated, you're working, but you just weren't where you wanted to be, and you're asking for his help, and he's like, nah, I don't think I can help you, or, I don't think you're going to like what I have to say. And you're like, dude, come on, help me. Could you tell us that story?
Sure.
I love that one.
I was struggling in the printing business. And when I was, I thought, I didn't have the formula, this magic formula. I didn't know what I was doing. So I called my cousin, Danny, who's about 10 years older, very successful. And I asked Danny if he could come to my business and see what I'm doing wrong so he could help me and, fix me up, get me on the right track. And he said no. He says...
And it's your cousin. You're like...
Yeah, he said no. He's busy with his own business, and he says, I already know what you're doing wrong. And I'm thinking, well, you don't really know a printing business. Don't I got to show it to you so you could tell me? He says, no, I already know what you're doing wrong. And then I go, well, and I was a little frustrated that he wouldn't come. I was trying to, talk him into coming. He said, no. And then I said, okay, well, then tell me what I'm doing wrong. He says, nah, I don't want to upset you because you're not going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
I go, what? Just tell me. I said, you're not going to do it. Why waste the time? So finally he tells me, he says, work harder. No, he goes, he didn't go work, he goes, do what I do. I go, what do you do? I've never seen you run a business. He goes, well, everyone knows what I do. I get in at 6, I get in the morning, I'm done at midnight, and Sunday I work 8 hours. I go, I could never do that. Are you crazy? I mean, you're single, but I have a wife and a kid and a kid on the way. Even if I was single, I could never work that hard. He says, that's why I didn't want to tell you. Because how much more can you do? Because you're going to learn more. He goes, I think, like #1 in the city in LA in tennis, not because I was some great athlete. I just hit more tennis balls than everyone. So the more you work, the more you learn, and the more you get done, that'll solve your problems.
Yeah. And we live in a society right now that hustle culture is kind of become a taboo negative word, and it isn't all about working hard. And I think there are truths to that, right? But I think if I was going to extrapolate the message there, it's not so much that one is saying you have to work 120 hours to be a success, but you better be willing to put in the work, whatever that is.
Well, at times when you're under the gun. Look, if you're working hard and not working on the right things, it's a waste of time.
Yep.
You could work a lot less, work on the right things. You're going to be a lot more successful. But a lot of times you need to do both. And
to figure out what you don't know.
Yeah, and just to get you over the hump at times.
And you told me this a long time ago, but it also stuck out. So just because of your level of experience and education in the business world now, you're able to get as much done in 8 hours as it used to take you 40 or 50 hours.
Well, look, I felt like if I was in the printing business again, I could probably, work a lot less hours and be way better than I was.
But it was because you put in those hours and figured it out, right?
I got the experience, and I also matured. Also having children, you see, you learn a lot from that. I'm way better and more effective with my time. But it takes learning and being open-minded to learn.
And there's a principle there that I'm trying to hammer home, which is it's the development and the growth that you're pursuing. When you get better at something, it doesn't take as much time. But if you never invest the effort and energy to get good, you're never going to get to that point. And that's the investment in loss on the front end that we don't want to lose in the avoidance of hustle culture or working hard. You are going to have to work hard at things if you want to get good at them. I don't think I've seen anybody ever get really good at something at the top of their class who doesn't work hard at it. One other story. Tell us about the weekend story, working on the weekend story. You get a phone call on a Saturday and you're at the beach, I think with Brooke, if I remember correctly. But.
Yeah, well, this was the week before my cousin.
So bam, bam.
So it was the Monday I come in the office, and Mari, who was the receptionist at the time, and I came in a little late on Monday, goes, oh my gosh, Kirk Gibson, who is a baseball player, is the MVP of the National League in 1988, hit that great home run in the World Series, and I did a joint venture with Kirk to do a limited edition lithograph. And so he would sign them all. We did 1,988 of them. And so in that, I got to know him because he'd only sign like 100 at a time or 200, and I'd go to his place. He rented a home in Brentwood, and I'd go to his place, he'd sign them, and we got to know each other. So on the Monday, he's calling, and Mari goes, he seemed really angry. And I'm thinking, what could he be angry about? Because I paid him every month, and I didn't forget about an appointment I made with him to get some signs, so couldn't imagine what he would be mad about. And I call him up, and he, in very salty language, asked me where the hell I was on Saturday. This was pre-cell phones. It was 1988 or 1989, I guess. And he said that I was trying to get a hold of you. And I go, Saturday? Oh, I was with Brooke at the beach on Saturday. I took her to the beach. He says, what? I go, I took my Brooke to the beach. Dads take daughters to the beach. Don't you take your kids to the beach, Kirk? And he goes, losers do on Saturdays. Winners do it on Sunday. He goes, you think I was MVP because I was, taking 2 days off on the weekend? I was a football player at Michigan State. He was, explaining what he had to go through, which was very impressive. It's a very impressive man, what he was able to achieve. But he was really on me about it. And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh.
He was a football player at Michigan State, but then injured his knee.
He injured his knee and then ended up playing baseball.
As his backup plan.
Yeah, and I think he played baseball at Michigan State too, but he's more known as a football player. But I think Jim Leland was his minor league coach, and Leland worked with him after hours all the time to get him caught up, and he would tell that story. But it was, again, that was kind of the thought. Now, to your point, you don't want to do that forever. You won't have much of a life. But there are times where you have to, kick it in gear. So I had, but when he told me that, I go, God, what's with him? He's in a bad mood.
Yeah.
And then with,
Danny
when Danny said it, I'm thinking,
somebody's
wait
trying
a
to
minute.
get your attention.
Yeah, I think, someone's trying to give me a message here. I got to pick it up.
And just to clarify, Some people may hear there and go, oh, that's a toxic message that you have to sell out to be a success or to not care about your family. And it's just to be clear, obviously we're talking about a period of time, and I'm going to get to where that led you in a second. But in context, and you obviously have a very healthy family, incredible kids, incredible wife. It's just knowing and be willing to do what it takes when it's time to do it. And
Yes.
you've already said it's like not forever,
Mm-mm.
but know that season. And when you're in that season, own that season, right? And for you, you were a business owner. You weren't an employee of somebody else's company. This was your company, and it was going to rise and fall based on your decisions, which is a lot of stress. And so, you know, I know
Well, and also when I went into the business world, and it's probably why my first business failed, I didn't want to work a ton. I wanted to have a fun life, and I thought I could do it without having to do all that. And I studied business, and I studied great people for my, since I was a child. So I felt like I would figure this out. And then it got to the point after these two conversations, I said, okay, I just gotta put in the time right now.
You had told me when you were younger that you were pretty emotional and impulsive, and that shocks me. And I bring it up because the person I know, the person I've always known, is not emotional. Well, you're passionate, which I love, but I've never seen you get emotional and say emotional, irrational things. And you're the farthest thing from impulsive in my book. And so when I heard you say that, I'm like, whoa, you put in a lot of work if that's the case. And I bring that up because there are people who are young who probably feel like they're emotional, they're impulsive, they're irrational, and they're trying to grow out of it. So what advice would you give to that person? Like, how did you grow out of it?
Well, it was something I was working on since I was a kid. It was hard for me to sit still and even read, even though I loved reading. I would just do certain things, like I'd read for 10 minutes, then I could goof around for a minute or two. It was schoolwork. Then I could work myself up to 20 minutes, and I could shoot some baskets for a bit. I had to reward myself for sticking to things. And that was when I was young. Then some part of it was, learning boundaries, or, having people help you. Early on, Susan took over our checking account. She took away my ATM. And so I wasn't able to spend money.
How did you feel about that?
No, I needed it. I was not good with my money.
Yeah.
And she would give me money each day to spend, for that day, for breakfast and lunch. And so sometimes you need to do certain things to protect yourself from yourself until you could get your own discipline there.
Yeah.
And then for me, what works is building my discipline muscle and routine, and sticking to my routine and schedule. And so that's what I had to learn.
Routine and schedule.
Routine and schedule, discipline in other ways.
So how would the discipline muscle, this is a big one, and just as a coach, I see this a lot. Discipline is something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
How can somebody get more discipline, or what did you do to become more disciplined?
Well, discipline has bad PR. Because
Really?
you discipline your kids when they do wrong. So discipline has a very negative connotation.
Right.
But I think discipline is what allows you to have a great life.
Yes.
I knew early on, obviously you need discipline to be faithful, to have a great marriage. And so that takes discipline. There's good things about discipline, but it takes work. So, to me, what I would suggest to people that want to work on their discipline, hopefully everyone does, it's based on you. Some people, because of the religion, could have dietary laws. Or right now it's Ramadan, and it's a good time to fast. If you want to spend the month fasting, that's great discipline. It's very hard to go all day and all night without food or water or drinking. Obviously, there's other reasons to do it, for spiritual reasons and others, but it's great for people, I think. Some people like meditation, and to meditate the same time every day, I think, is wonderful to do. It could be working out the same time. It could be other diet that you could do, to eat a healthy diet. There's a lot of things you could do for discipline, but I think the more you build the discipline, the better it is. that way, when you get impulsive, when I do, I have the discipline to realize it and not do what I need to do. Now, I'm going to be tested Friday because I can't go shopping because I want to buy everything. It's my brother's birthday, and his wife and him and Susan and I are going to lunch, and going to be in Beverly Hills. We'll see if I could control myself, but hopefully I can.
And you practice, you're kosher, right? And you had explained to me that you had picked up kind of practice undering Jewish law mostly as a discipline thing, right? There was other elements of it that you were attracted to, but for you it was, I don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of the back end of this or have my own feelings about it, but I'm really doing it as a way to discipline myself.
A lot of it, primarily at the beginning, it was just to honor my grandfather. And also it was good for him, and he was an amazing man, a great grandfather. I guess I want to be like him. Yeah. But the thing that really kept me to really want to actually do it is I need discipline. And it's great to know that I can't eat whatever I want or do whatever I want whenever I want, that there's something higher purpose there that I got to control. And I think, for someone like myself that is impulsive, I think it's very good.
It's a lot of self-awareness to recognize that. I love that explanation. It was just like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, and so whether it's Latter-day Saints or Seventh-day Adventists or Muslim people, and I'm sure other religions too, it's good to do, to follow those things and do those things, just to connect with your, the generations that came before you, and also to develop your kind of discipline that I think will help you down the road for whatever you're trying to do.
100%. There's lots of ways to get there, but those are really effective ways for sure. And that's cool. I love that. So your business struggles for a while, and then it doesn't. You exit commercial printing, and I think you had told me, just one more point I want to get before we get there. You had told me something that also made a lot of sense to me. I'm just thinking of these early business lessons that I've learned from you. Slow is fast is something that you said to me very early on, and it stuck. But something else you told me, and I back tested it after you had said it, and I thought about it more and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of truth to this. So if you could just fill in the blanks. You basically were explaining printing worked for you because it was a slow grind. You didn't come up quick. And that stability or that process for your constitution really was good for you. And you brought up, and I back tested my own life, and I've seen this enough to go, well, I don't know if it's always true, but it's true enough that this is good advice, that people who make money quick lose money quick, and their lives are very unstable, right? And I think it's basically how you said it. And correct me if I said that wrong.
Well, a little different. I would say it like this, is when I was younger, in my 20s, I was looking at, some very successful men in Los Angeles and trying to figure out how their life was, what it looked like. I just wanted to learn from successful people. And through that, just as a byproduct, what I realized is that there were some men that were extremely successful, but their lives were chaos, at least in my opinion. Yep. Their kids were fighting with each other. They're married to their third wife, who was younger than their first child. and I'm going, I don't want my life to be like that. And then there's other people that, had great marriages and the kids loved each other. And it's like, yeah, that's what I want, like my family that I grew up. So one of the things I observed, and it was maybe not a big enough sample size, but it influenced me, is the difference was the ones that had that great life tended to be in manufacturing. And the ones that had the craziness tended to be where they could do extremely well doing deals and things like that. And I'm sure there's plenty of deal guys that could have steady, great lives. But what I observed, I saw that, and I knew I had a tendency to be impulsive. So I felt that having that great life, getting in manufacturing would be important. And a mentor of mine, Maury, told me the same thing. When I told him I was worried about my impulsiveness could ruin my life, he says, well, get in manufacturing. You only make a penny a day. You make a lot of pennies over time, but do something like that, and that could help you. And so he kind of agreed with what I was thinking. And so I felt like, let me get into manufacturing. And that way he said, Maury would say, it will cure you of that impulsiveness.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it did.
Yeah.
the grind every day.
And that makes sense to me. In looking back at that season of your life, so you exit sizable sum of money at that point in your life. I think you're in your late 30s, early 40s, but correct me if I'm wrong. You at that point could really do whatever you want, right? You're financially in a position where it's like, hey, if I don't want to work again, I don't have to. And it sounds like for a season you didn't. So fill in the blanks if I'm missing pieces here. But then this opportunity comes up where it's kind of your second career. And going back to some of the things that have come through this is you have a heart to teach. A couple different times you reference, well, I almost became a teacher, started a school. Now you're in a season in your life where you can probably do whatever you want. And you get an opportunity to go work with this company. And I'd love for you to tell the rest of the story. Work with this company called Sidcor. And you're like, I don't know if I really, I'm good. Like, I don't know if I want to do anything else. So what happened there? Let's start with that story, because that's a fascinating one.
So, I was, actually, like 2 days after we sold the commercial printing business, Bram Goldsmith, who was the founder of City National Bank, who was just a mentor of mine and nicely took an interest in me. I don't know why I was such a small customer in the scheme of his life, but he was one of those guys. He just took interest in younger people. He called me up to congratulate me, and that he called, it was such an honor to me, and I felt so great. And then he says, look, you think you have a lot of money? You don't. That's what he said. Believe me, your wife's going to want a bigger house, want this and that. You don't know how long you're going to live. Plus, you're starting to know what I was like 40.
Figured it out.
You're starting to know what you need to do as a business. Your next act is going to be the real one. Yeah. So don't rest on your laurels. Go find something to do.
So it's 2 days after you.
That was 2 days.
So
and I was like kind of crushed.
Yeah.
I was kind of crushed about it. I go, really?
Well, thank you.
Okay. But I knew Bram was really wise, and I knew he was right.
Okay, so that was kind of set in the back of your mind.
That hit me right away, but I didn't really,
Sure.
It's kind of hard to figure out. I was kind of, I worked a lot of hours. I had a ton of stress, and just even getting paid from the clients is so hard, and the money and making payroll. And I had some moments and I needed to get my rest and sea legs back under me. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a teacher, maybe teach Pepperdine or somewhere, or Kowloon or something, or whether I would maybe be a high school basketball coach. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but one of my investors in Sidcor was one of the founders. One of my investors in the printing was a founder of one of the co-founders of Sidcor, and wanted me to kind of explore it. And, I was so about it at first, but to when I do something like that right now, I just felt I needed time. It was only 2 years after I sold.
I was going to ask, so it's 2 years after you sold. So you took a couple of years to kind of get your sea legs.
Well, I was still on a contract with the company that bought. So I was doing stuff. It wasn't like I was doing nothing, but
how long?
Not enough for my wife. She, the famous saying, "I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch." She told me that because I was with her too much, I guess, during the lunchtime. She had plenty to do with, because we had a third child and who was young, and so, but I did go visit a young man at the time, Jamie Hepp, and visited him at his office to see what, learn more. And it just hit me.
He was in Burbank, right?
He was in Burbank.
Yeah.
And it just hit me that, wow, he is a go-getter and eager, to learn and to grow. Working with him, wow, that could be right up my alley. Second, what I thought with the business is that it's like getting, for these young people, a mini MBA in the real world.
Yeah.
To be able to learn how to sell, which you need no matter what you're going to do in life, you need to learn how to sell.
Yep.
I don't care if you're going to be a teacher. You got to be able to sell the kids.
Teacher, preacher, politician.
Anything. I don't care if you're going to be an architect. If you can't sell someone to buy your design, it's going to be in the wastebasket. So learning how to sell to me is priority one. also at the same time learning just how to be in a professional environment, and then building teams that you get to do if you successful. I thought it was great. I thought everything people are learning is like a school. And then the other thing, I knew the business could be huge, a multi-billion-dollar business, because the most important thing to a business is getting new customers, and the best way is with people.
Sales.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into this,
Yeah,
but I want to go back one step for people who are maybe in that season where they're looking at exiting a company that they built, and it took you 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. Okay. And the company's still around, right? It's still
it's owned by R.R. Donnelley.
Yeah, okay. So one of the bigger
printing company.
one of the bigger printing companies. Makes sense. What made you decide it was time to get out of that industry?
Well, I wasn't thinking it at the time, but I was starting to read about the impact on the internet. And
the digital revolution.
This digital revolution, and I could see it. A lot of it made sense, but a lot of it seemed like science fiction.
And this was like late 1990s?
Yeah. Like 96 or so. And that, wait a minute, when you're reading it, it says that, you're not going to need printed stuff anymore, that you're just going to get it on your phone or your computer, and people aren't going to need brochures or catalogs. And I'm thinking, if that's the case, I could be in real trouble. That is not going to be good for me. At least what I thought at the time. It got me scared. A little bit like blockchain today is that there's going to be big uses of it. People can't really find the uses yet, but it's going to have a huge impact. And that if blockchain could, it's like trying to make my business obsolete. That's not a good, because it's 50-50 true. I'm in trouble. I don't want to play those odds. So I felt at the time that this isn't going to be good for me, the internet. And so I might as well, while the going is good, get out and get my nest egg out now rather than wait 30 years and get it out. If this happens, it could kill my nest egg, so to speak. So that kind of got me motivated to make the change. Now, in retrospect, the company's doing more revenue than when I was there. So I maybe overreacted, but
you weren't entirely wrong. I mean, I know a lot of people in the printing space that their business was radically changed. They adapted, but it has radically changed
and we could have adapted and all, but that's what happened. I got a little scared. Or a lot scared.
You do such a brilliant job of unpacking the competitive advantage of being an outsourced sales and marketing company. Can you explain, in the midst of everything that's going on, you really give 3 reasons why our business is very competitive for somebody young coming in. Can you explain what those 3 things are?
Well, one of the things I suggest to people that are thinking about, just started or about to start at one of these independent companies is that give it 1 year, your best every day, and then decide if this is your cup of tea. The reason for it's hard to know what you want to do when you're young. You need experience. So get into something. And I say you win for 3 reasons. 1, you have at least 1 year on your resume, which shows future employers that you could keep a job. Second thing you get is sales skills. And again, like we talked about earlier, no matter what you do, it's invaluable for your future. And the third thing you get is, because of the environment you're in, where every day you have to perform, you have to be your best, and you have to learn great attitude, you have to learn work ethic, you have to learn dealing with rejection and things not going your way. Those things are so important for your future. That's what determines success. So between getting a year on your resume, learning sales, and learning these intangible soft skills, after a year, if you want to like it and you think this could be for you, keep on going. And put in that best every day. If not, you got something really good to build upon. And I think that's very valuable.
And then from a business standpoint, there's a few things that you've outlined that you really liked about the business. One is right, can't be obsolete, not going to go obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
Tend to do well in recessions, right? Fairly recession proof as far as that can go.
Mm-hmm.
And 3, there's always demand, right? Because salespeople are what generate revenue for companies, so there's usually always demand for that. So from an economic and industry standpoint, it's pretty stable.
Yeah.
When you look at the future,
And one other thing too, Sebastian, as you know, we don't charge our clients until we get them a customer.
yeah,
So there's no risk or upfront costs. So a typical, want to get customers, you're going to do a big TV campaign. You put up a lot of money. You don't know what the results are. It's hard to identify who the customers are. With us, there's no risk.
right. Indirect versus direct marketing,
Yeah.
and you're able to quantify that. And I think, the numbers prove out the company continues to grow. You guys are doing great.
Mm-hmm.
Coming out of a pandemic that was pretty scary there for a bit, right? You're like, well, when you're in sales and a lot of it is predicated upon face-to-face sales and you can't see people, that's pretty scary.
You can't be in the store.
Right, can't be in the store and you can't engage with people in the same way.
Yeah.
I thought your leadership through that time period was pretty incredible to be able to watch, and just how you navigated and prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
Another lesson there is key to timing is preparation. It's like I don't know that you were modeling for a pandemic,
No,
but
wasn't.
you were modeling for, hey, if things happen, we need to be ready for it, and you were ready for it.
Yeah.
And it was pretty incredible to see how decisive you were with your action, and how immediately it was like, hey, here's how we're going to do it. How's we're going to play it. And my opinion, the company came out much stronger on the other end.
Yeah.
And back on the offensive, which I think is cool. What are you getting excited about in the future? I have a few more questions. I want to get in some rapid fire questions with you, but just when you look at Sidcor, what does your future with Sidcor look like, as much as you want to talk about that? I know your goal is to leave a legacy. I always hear you talk about that, and it resonates so deeply with me. That's my reason for being here, to leave the next generation better than we found it. So what are you excited about? What are you paying attention to right now?
Well, I mean, I'm most excited about all the people and the culture that we have. I think we've worked really hard for many, many years, many of us, to get where we're at today. And I think the seeds are so exciting.
Yeah.
And to me, business and get good people and great culture, you could do anything. And that's what excites me the most. We have a new generation of leadership at Sidcor, led by Vera Quinn.
Yeah.
Our goal, our vision is to make our business last for generations, to develop people, give them opportunity, in a world that's getting more digitized all the time. We're betting on people. We're going to unleash the power and uniqueness of people to do incredible things. So I just love our people. I see the culture. I was in your office and just meeting some great people. It makes me feel, this is awesome. And so that's what I'm most excited about. And our new, and Vera and her team, Rich Mangaffis and others, I mean, they're doing a spectacular job. And I just think the future's so bright. There's a lot of things coming as we improve our capabilities. That's what we need to do, is innovate, improve our capabilities. We have the people to do it. We have the resources to do it. And I think over the next few years, we're going to see a lot of neat things coming. And I'm really excited what this new generation's going to want to do.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's an exciting time all around. A couple of few rapid fire questions. You can pass if you don't have an answer. Outside of your grandfather and father, what mentors have had the biggest influence on your life?
Well, they were by far,
I know, which is
the
why
most.
we already talked to them a
Mine
bit.
and
So
my
yeah,
Dad. I would say more recently, Dan Fredrickson.
who was the original owner of FedEx?
No, he was the
Kinko's.
Kinko's. He was the operated that business. Great guy, and I've learned a lot from Dan. Was working with me for most of the time I was CEO at Sidcor. He was nice enough to do that. And I just learned a ton from him of how to build a business of scale like we have. So he's been great. Early on, when I was in college, I'm more of a shyer, quieter person, And I didn't think I had the ability to do business. My dad has such a big personality, such a big, strong guy. He could say anything to anyone. He's, not fearful at all in that way, or at least I didn't think he was. And so I didn't think I had that what it took, but I worked for Howard, who was more my temperament when I was in college, in high school and college, and I felt like, wow, he built an amazing business. And so that gave me that kind of confidence I could do it. And he mentored me too. Even when I was first starting commercial printing, getting into that, whether I should do it or not, I talked to him about it and got his advice. He said, definitely go do it. You have what it takes.
I get hit up regularly with people looking for mentorship. And I think there's likely a void in our society, which is why people are looking for mentors. What advice would you give to somebody who is looking for mentors? How do you get a hold of people that are willing to take the time to invest in you? Because there's an opportunity cost for them, right?
Yeah.
So, who do you want to get mentorship from?
Well, someone that you see what they've done in their life and that's what you want.
Right.
You got to find someone like that. But one of the things like Dan, luckily, Gail Mahalik, who worked, for Dan and then went to work for us. She was the one that set me up with Dan and, because knew what I was looking for. I needed someone that ran a business from a certain size to multi-billion so I could learn what to do. But Dan didn't want to work with me. And I was told Dan, I think I'd pay him $10,000 a day to help me. It's a lot of money. And he said he wouldn't even meet with me. So then I asked Gail to talk him into just having lunch. So we had lunch, and I told Dan, look, he goes, I don't want to work. You're going to do whatever you want to do. I don't want to waste my time. I got better things to do with my time. People don't really want advice. They just want to do what they want to do, and they just want someone to justify it. Now, it's not me. I go, Dan, listen. If you tell me what to do, we'll get in a discussion, and if I disagree, I'll give you all the reasons. But at the end of the discussion, if you tell me, do it, I will do it. And I'll tell you what the results were right away. That's my commitment to you. And he didn't really believe it. So he said, I want you to do these 3 things, right? And tell me how they go. So I got back to the office after lunch. I sent him an email to make sure I got the 3 things right. This is what the 3 things are. This is when I'm going to do it. Did I get it right? Because exactly. So I do them. And I say, okay, and I give him an email back within a week. I did this one, Dan. It worked just like you said, and this is what I learned. I go, Dan, I did this one. It blew up in my face. I don't know if I executed it wrong. It was the wrong idea. And this 3rd one, it worked perfect, and this is what I learned. He writes back, yeah, second idea, I gave you bad advice. But I learned from it because I felt like whatever Dan tells me, I'm going to learn something. If I try it and it doesn't work, I learn something. If it works, I learn something. So the only way I'm going to grow is do something that I normally wouldn't do on my own.
100%.
And that's how you keep a good mentor.
Oh, that's incredible. That's great advice. People will say, well, it wasn't all perfect. Well, nobody's all perfect.
No.
Right? It's that's not how it works, but being able to respect that relationship. And you don't have to go into details of anything he told you, but did anything he say seem wild to you? Or was that all kind of common sense stuff that you're like, oh, why didn't I think about that?
No, nothing seemed wild, but many times I didn't agree.
Yeah.
And I tried, and once in a while I persuaded him to my way. But usually I didn't, and I tried it, and then I could see after I did it why it worked.
There's a lot of humility in to respecting somebody enough to listen to them and execute fully, even if you go, I don't necessarily agree with this.
Yeah.
How many times would you say percentage-wise did you not agree and it ended up being the right advice on a percentage level?
Well, I would probably didn't agree half the advice he gave, and of the advice he gave, 3/4 of it worked.
So that's good math.
Yeah. And look, Dan is an amazing man. He has incredible character. I knew people, I had a couple people that worked, because when they sold to FedEx, it moved everyone to Dallas, and most people didn't move from, California. So I was fortunate to get some good Kinko's people, and they admired him like my dad admired Larry, and I knew he was a good man. And so that meant a lot. And plus, look what he did over there. Him and Paul, they built a huge company that was first class.
And their business isn't wildly different than ours,
No,
right?
no,
Or loosely, there was enough similarities.
Dan calls it fraction of the action, meaning Kinko's didn't own the Kinko store. You know, someone like you owned it, or a group of you and Fareed or different people owned it. So some people started as a copier guy or whatever, and so it was you know, a lot of influence.
Yeah.
You're dealing with some strong personalities. And
there's enough similarity there that could be useful.
A lot of similarities.
All right, couple questions, rapid fire. How do you feel about therapy?
Well, like I mentioned, purposely I mentioned it on this that I do therapy. I mentioned Al. He's great. I mentioned therapy because the reason why I did therapy, I was in a board meeting with Dan and I overreacted to the private equity group that we had at the time.
He was in that meeting.
And he was in the meeting and goes, there's something, Gary, that is so unprofessional how you acted. That temper, they triggered you. And that, you need therapy. I go, what, Dan? Me? I'm with Susan forever. I got my friends from childhood. I'm the last person. He goes, no, that behavior was so unprofessional that you need therapy. And like I said, if you tell me, I'm doing it. So, but I felt there was I didn't want to tell anyone.
Yeah.
I felt embarrassed about it, like there was something wrong with me. But the reason why I talk about therapy all the time, because I think it's great for people, everyone.
Well, this is why I wanted you to bring it up.
You mentioned earlier today in a meeting how important emotional intelligence is.
Yeah.
But yet all we're trained in school is cognitive intelligence, you know, how to solve problems, how to think sequentially and so forth. But nothing on emotional intelligence, but yet most of our success in life and our marriage and our being a parent or building a business is based on emotional intelligence. How are you going to learn it? Therapy.
Yep.
I learned so much. Al helped me tremendously. And so I want, if my wish is that every young person could do therapy. I know it's expensive, so you may have to save up for it. But I think it's so important. And that's why I mention it, because I think it's so important. I don't want anyone to feel that there's a stigma to it. It's only healthy for you.
I feel like the younger generations, there's less stigma. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think it is important to bring up, and that's why I wanted to tell you, because so many people will avoid getting the help they need out of feeling shame or like they should be able to figure it out on their own. Yeah. And so I think it's so important.
It's still, and it's the one that, look, just like you, my job is to educate people and develop them and to be the best version of themselves. That's why I mentioned therapy. I have to, even though I'd prefer not to say anything, but that's my obligation.
And it is my humble opinion that I think most, if not everyone, should have a therapist or a friend or somebody. As a friend, I want to be careful with. Just have someone that you can process your shit with. Mm-hmm. It's so important. And evidently, obviously, somebody who's educated and trained to be able to help you. But I think that's an incredibly important thing. And because of how disconnected we are in our society, or how fear the vulnerability of processing, we don't. And then we don't deal with our shit, it deals with us. So I love that you did that. Give me 3 books, and don't say How to Win Friends and Influence People. Give me 3 other books that you think everyone should read. I know you're a reader, or give me ones that come to mind. If you don't have 3, you don't have 3.
Well, Mindset by Carol Dweck, I think, is fantastic. After that, and How to Win Friends, I don't think
he loves How to Win Friends.
I don't think there's a book that I could say is a must read. I really don't think that. Those for you that are in the Judeo-Christian, obviously the Bible, there's a lot there. There's a lot in the Quran for those that follow the Islamic faith. A lot of great stuff in the Buddhist and Hindu texts that I've read. So I think there's some wisdom in that. But other than that, I don't really, see any one book.
And How to Win Friends is easily the book you've recommended the most. I know this about you, which is why I said not that one, because I know that's the one.
I think that has
Which book have you read recently that you've enjoyed the most or had a profound impact?
Well, I'm reading Ryan Holiday's book, The Daily Stoic, And that's helping me.
Yeah.
I just like it. Gives me a reminder every day.
365 days.
Yeah, I just like that a lot. And, you know, I did a book club. My book club, we did meditations right before.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, and obviously he's one of the more famous Stoics. So it went hand in hand with that. So I love, you know, Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic. I'm reading a book right now. It's, I think, called Supreme Commander. It's about Dwight Eisenhower by Stephen Ambrose. And I am just enjoying that book so much. You know, Dwight, you know, I don't have the, let's say, the charismatic personality. I'm not the dynamic kind of leader and the, you know, the John Wayne, you know, kind of fire up the troops kind of. And Eisenhower's the kind of leader that just fits me well. And there's someone at work that is more my style, that I want to build this person's confidence that you could be a great leader. So I got this person, the Eisenhower book. I'm reading, you know, we'd read it and then we're kind of going over the points together. And I just love how he led. His humbleness, his ability to make others, you know, be at their greatest. He could deal with all kinds of personalities and didn't take it personal, didn't have to, you know, and he gave the credit to everyone. And when there was blame, he took it firsthand. I mean, I just love that. So that book's firing me up right now.
I'm going to have to pick that one up. You told me Eisenhower was an S-type personality, which is actually, we use the DISC profile in our business. I think you do too. So that's it's a useful thing. S leaders, studying S leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's just funny to think about. One last question. If you could go back and tell your 20-year-old something.
Oh, start therapy. That would be it. Go to therapy.
Sooner the better.
Right. You know, you invested a lot in your school. This is more important than your school. Take whatever, make the investment, do it religiously. It'll make you better in every which way, a better leader, better parent, a better father, and just, yeah, I would say that.
And the number one piece of career advice, somebody seeking career advice early in life.
It doesn't matter. I hear it all the time with young people. I'm making this, I'm making that. You know, they're just leaving for a job because I didn't get the promotion. At the beginning, be in an environment that's pushing you every day to be your very best, and that you're learning and growing the most so that you could be the best 10 years down the road. That when it really matters. Just push yourself, you know, compete with yourself to be the best.
Yes,
of
an area where you
yourself.
can grow and develop.
Yeah,
I love that. I agree with that. Well, Gary, this has been an absolute pleasure. It's been great having you on the podcast today.
Yep.
We'll have to do this again.
Of course.
A lot of
Well,
good
thank
discussion
you. You
coming up.
asked some great questions. And Sebastian, I just really like our friendship and knowing you all these years and all these years in the future. It's going to be fun.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.